foreign men in Dublin, literally, and this is the truth. This is you can verify this any way you like. Literally threatening babies. Well, that's what they're doing. They're essentially eating into and partaking all the resources that your ancestors built up over many generations.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. The episode's amazing guest and returning guest again is Domino, all the way on the Emerald Isle. How you doing, Derek?
I'm doing very well, Nick. Thanks very much for having me back on. I'm delighted, as always, to chat to you and your esteemed audience, all the way from the Emerald Isle, or as our new to the parish illegal immigrants call it, Treasure Ireland.
Well, yes. Somebody was saying to me the other day that life in the UK is getting worse and worse. And I said, not technically. It depends when you arrived here. Because if you're one of the new arrivals, your life is getting better and better than it was last year. It's only the people who have been here decades and decades, and ancestors have lived here, and their ancestors built this country. They're the people who are going backwards now, not the new arrivals. They're doing quite well through our taxes, through our hard work, our ancestors building a first world country.
Well, that's what they're doing. They're essentially eating into and partaking all the resources that your ancestors built up over many generations. I mean, that is now being squandered. That is now being given over willingly and willfully by your government. And it's not just the current abomination of a government under Starmer. I'm talking about the previous Conservative governments. I mean, really, they were terrible. And what you've got now is even worse. And, it's very similar to what we have here in Ireland. As I say to people, look, what we have at the moment is absolutely atrocious. But if Sinn Féin get in, which they probably will next, it's going to be even worse. It'll be similar to what you are experiencing in the UK with Labour. People thought, we'll give them a go. It couldn't be any worse than what we've got. And then it turns out that it is worse than what you had. So I'm delighted that reform is on the scene for you guys. And I know you're involved in that yourself. And I see very positive things there. I'm not saying that in every way it's the finished article, not saying that at all, but I think it's a great step in the right direction. And I very much hope that in the next election that reform is the new government. And then that's when the rubber will meet the road. We'll see, if all the hype is just hype or if actual things can get done. But you're way ahead of us there, Nick. I have to give you kudos for that with reform. We're not even at the point where we've got a viable reform party here.
Yeah, I think I've come to the conclusion now that reform have a lot riding on their shoulders. Not necessarily just changing the country, but if reform turn out to be a different version of the crap we have now, and there's a possibility reform could be that. I don't get swayed very easily, so I'm always doubtful for everything. But if they turn out to be a turquoise version of what we've got now, the only solution then will be mass violence on the streets of the UK, because the British public have had enough. And all our hopes and dreams and desires at the moment are with Nigel Farage. Not that he's perfect, not that he's a second coming of the Lord, but that he'll start changing things and just start improving the country a little bit, because this is going to take generations to fix. We know that. But if he lets the country down, I fear for the future. I fear for the violence, because people have had enough. And from what I'm seeing online as well, the people on your island have definitely had enough. I'm seeing stuff online now that's surprising me in Ireland. I'm seeing violence. I'm seeing everyday people standing up, shouting, screaming, saying they've had enough. Unless we get a grip, unless our political elite get a grip, it's going to be hell for me and you.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely correct in what you're saying about the current state of affairs here in Ireland, because we are one notch below outright, the whole lid blowing off the thing. And we're talking about mass civil unrest and all kinds of unpleasant things. And just the other day, and this is in the past few days, I did a video. There was two incidents, all captured on film, about foreign men in Dublin, literally. And this is the truth. This is you could verify this any way you like. Literally threatening babies. I mean, this is after the atrocity, as you know, about the three young girls who were viciously stabbed in the centre of Dublin a couple of years ago by an Algerian man. We had two foreign men, an African man and another guy, I don't know where he was from, on separate videos. One threatened to attack a baby in a pram with a sliced off metal can, and was prevented, was thankfully arrested very quickly, put in the back of a police van. But he was out later that day, according to reports. He was just out. And another guy made his own TikTok video. This guy was from God knows where, literally living off grid in a wooded area near Dublin. He built his own whole encampment, literally built it. The authorities reportedly knew he was there. The police knew he was there, but yet he was allowed to just carry on, build his own little camp. And he made TikTok videos threatening, and I kid you not, and this is horrific, this is absolutely mind-blowing, threatening to end, shall we say, for the purposes of YouTube, Irish babies. That he was so annoyed with Irish people, and he wasn't getting enough, and he wasn't being given enough, that he was threatening the lives of Irish babies. And he made this video himself and uploaded it to TikTok. I mean, I don't know about you, Nick, but this to me is mind-blowing, that we're at this point, that people like this, foreigners, are in our midst. Now, these guys were caught for various reasons. How many other guys are floating around the ether with a similar mindset? And the answer is, we don't know. And the even bigger answer is the government don't know. So these are the times we live in. And that's why people, as you rightly point out, are at boiling point now. Because you can't unsee these things. You know, we're all on the internet now. You know, it's not like most of my audience are an older demographic, say 40 up. And, you know, you would think, oh, well, they're all watching mainstream TV, BBC, RTE, so but they're not. More and more of them are starting to watch you and I, and people like us, who are telling them the truth. That what we're saying, things that resonate with what they see every day, whereas when they tune into RTE or the BBC, it's like a fantasy world. It's a world they don't recognize, because it's not a real, it's fantasy land. Whereas, so they are, you know, all age groups, not just the young, not just the 30-somethings, but I'm talking about the older demographic are now watching shows like us and saying, you know what? That chimes exactly with things I'm seeing every day. So I'm going to keep watching them, because that seems to be where the truth is. And that is terrible for the government, because they're losing the narrative, Nick. They're losing the narrative. And if they lose the older generation who mostly vote, did you know that of the under 30s here in Ireland, 70% don't vote?
Wow.
70% of under 30s do not vote. They've checked out. They've checked out. That's horrifying. So, yes, you're right. Here in Ireland, people are at boiling point. And they're at boiling point because it's like the government is kind of a rodeo horse rider. You ever see those riders that are desperately clinging on to the back of this crazy bucking bronco, and they can't control it? They're just trying to hang on for as long as they can. That's the impression a lot of people have of our political class. They've lost control completely, and they're just desperately trying to get through the day. And people are saying, look, we don't want this anymore. We need somebody to calm things down and get things sorted. And it's not happening. So that's why you're seeing the mass protests, Nick. That's why you're seeing the mass protests. And there's another one in Cork on June the 6th. And then there's another one which I'll be at on the 22nd of June in Dublin. And if projections are correct, it will be double or treble the size of what you saw for the last Dublin process, which really is going to put the wind up the government.
Yeah, we had something similar this weekend on Saturday across the UK. Not as big as the Irish demonstrations. It was called the General Strike. I don't know why they held it on a Saturday when most people are not working, but let's forget that bit. But it reminded me of those Irish demonstrations because all you could see was a sea of British flags. You know, the St Andrew's flag, St George's flag, the Union Jack. There was other British flags there as well, county flags, and it was fantastic to see. It was friendly, you know, it was welcoming. There was no trouble because the people have had enough. Let me jump back to those two guys doing TikTok videos threatening babies. That in itself is scary because we don't want nutcases in our communities, and every community contains a certain amount of nutcases. It wasn't like before mass immigration there was no violence or no crime on our islands. Of course there was, but the scary thing about this is both those men, if arrested, both of them were out that day, are not going to be sentenced to jail and will still stay in the country. We have foreigners in your country, in my country, saying, I'm going to kill the indigenous people of this land. And we let them stay and we pay them to stay and we give them money and we give them food. And they're saying they're going to kill us. How weak of a leader do you have to be? How damaged and pathetic of a country do you have to be to allow people who say they hate you to stay in your country? It's mind-boggling.
Well, again, it's a sign of the times, Nick. You know, we have possibly the weakest, most flaccid, impotent brand or batch of politicians now that in history, probably in history. They cannot make a difficult decision. They cannot do anything. Like they're constantly watching. They're like flakes blowing in the wind, watching their you know, these various polls, listening to NGOs and all these bleeding heart lefties and all these human rights lawyers and, you know, who are being paid by the public, by the way. We're paying them. And instead of listening to the people, you know, they seem to have detached themselves from 90-something% of the ordinary public, as if that section of society, you know, the vast majority don't count. We're not interested in you. We're not listening to you. And that's why in Ireland there's a huge hunger for change in the political sphere. And it's not being, we don't have a reform, as I said, yet. We have a lot of loose, you know, individual operators that can't seem to coalesce and can't seem to, a lot of egos involved. You know how it works, and it can't seem to get any gravitas. And so the government is still ahead on that score with the three main parties, and I include the so-called opposition of Sinn Féin, which is opposition in name only. They're pretty much just waiting for their turn at the trough, and that's why. As I said to somebody the other day, when they were asking me, look, these protests, I mean, really, do they matter? Is it worth it? Can anything change? And my point was this: the politicians in Leinster House, our Parliament, have to look out their big bay windows and see a sea of tricolours, a mass of people, all angry, flying the flag of their nation that has been given away, as far as I'm concerned. And they have to be nervous, and not nervous, scared of that mass of people. They have to be more scared of that sea of tricolours than they are of Ursula von der Leyen and the blue EU flag and all the global corporations or the NGO sector. And at the moment, that is not the case. They're more afraid of the EU than they are of their own people. So do protests work? I say yes. Yes, they do. Because first of all, you have to normalise protesting for everybody, which is happening and was borne out by the last big protest in Dublin, where I was in a sea of people and tricolours. But not alone that, Nick. I was in a sea of diverse people. There was young, there was middle-aged, there was old people there. There were people pushing prams with small children. A family, like you said about the last protest, it was family friendly. It was Ireland friendly. It was nation friendly. And, so you're normalizing ordinary people coming out on the streets, which is, it has to get to there. You have to get to the point where ordinary people are saying, look, I'm going to that protest, even though I never go to protests. And I've never even been at a protest. I thought protests were for headbangers and people who are kind of unhinged and, ultra lefty or trade unionists or whatever. But they didn't see themselves as any of those. So we have to, number one, normalize protesting for everybody and then mobilize them, get them out. And I know for a fact, because I the comment section of my channel, a lot of people were saying and commenting, I wish I was there. I wish I had been there. Because I was there and I was obviously saying, look, how marvelous and wonderful it was and what a spirit it was. And the amount of comments I got from people saying, I'm mad I wasn't there. I wish I'd been there. I'll be at the next one. And that's the only way things can really change here, Nick, because we don't have reform. It's going to have to be pure people power, massive people power, so that the politicians simply can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why these things are called movements, because it's not just one event that changes everything. It's a movement. It takes time to gather pace, to gather speed, to bring more people on board. And it takes time. Now, you said that the government ignore 90% of the people. I don't think they ignore the people. I think they despise the people. I think they hear the people all the time, but in their little circles, they're going, I'm so embarrassed that 90% of my country are white Nazi scum. I'm so embarrassed. Why can't we be more European? Why can't we be more opening? Why can't we be more pink and fluffy? I'm ashamed of my compatriots. I'm ashamed of my people, because that's exactly what happens in this country. The elite look down upon the people as scum. It used to be in our countries where our elite, our leaders, our politicians were servants of the people. Somewhere last couple of decades, it's changed. They now think they rule over the people. And we need to remind them that, no, you're our servants, you're public servants, and we can remove you from power anytime we like. And every politician should always be scared of the public, not physically, but scared of the public, as in, if I don't do what they want me to do, I'm out of a job. And if I go too far, I may get strung up, just like what happens in other countries around the world. But they think they rule us now. They think they're the elite class and they're the replacement of, in your case, the monarchy. They think they rule you.
Absolutely, they do. And this is because we have now what I would call a political class. It's a class of people. They kind of get into this politics thing as early as they can with a view to just building a whole lifelong career of rattling around Parliament, sometimes in opposition, sometimes in government, maybe even as a minister. But they don't see it as, like you said, I want to get in and serve the public. I want to give of my time and talents, such as they may be, for the greater good. No, they don't see it as that, Nick. They see it as a career. They see it as a pensionable, comfortable, loads of money and possibly some nice places on boards after I bow out. They see it as this trough, and they want to be at that trough with other people like themselves who are also at the trough. And that's not you and me. We're the guys outside. We don't even get in the room. We don't even get in the building, So they only hang out with themselves. Parliament, as far as I'm concerned, is performative art. They'll be giving it loads at the dispatch box, and then I'll go and have a gin and tonic after it and clap each other on the back like best buddies. It's nonsense. There's no principles there at all. They're blowing the wind flakes, and as far as my batch of politicians are concerned, they're being paid, if you like, in one form or another by the EU. Completely and utterly subservient to the EU and bureaucrats in Brussels. They're essentially county councillors, glorified county councillors. And I think it's 70 something percent of our laws now essentially come from Brussels. And it's just copy and paste. They do all the decisions over there, and then we have to copy and paste them into our legislation here. And in fact, in the last week or so, the EU has threatened Ireland now. It's threatened to sue Ireland, because they can do stuff like that, because we haven't implemented hate speech laws to their satisfaction. So they've given us, I think, 2 months to get it sorted. Now, our government did bring in hate laws last year. They had to dilute them in certain ways because the draconian elements of the hate speech laws were so crazy. They were absolutely bonkers, Nick, that the public, when they found out about it, just were ringing up their local representatives 24/7. And then Elon Musk got involved, and then Joe Rogan was talking about it. The whole thing blew up in their faces. So they had to can that. I mean, I'll give you an example. It was so crazy that they could come into your home just at any time, seize all of your devices, anything, computers, phones, iPads, the lot, and demand your password. If you didn't give them that, you'd be immediately arrested, possibly jailed. And if you even had a meme on your phone somewhere that you hadn't sent anyone, that somebody had sent you, that you hadn't broadcast, you could be done for that. You could be done for that. And even if somebody came in, if they could come in hypothetically to your home. Let's say you're having a party for your child or a kid's party, and there were other parents there. They could not only seize your devices, they could seize theirs. Anybody in the home, anybody in the building. I mean, it was absolute Orwell stuff. And that got canned because it was so utterly crazy. But the EU is having none of it. And they're now saying to our government, get that sorted. You didn't go far enough. You didn't curtail free speech enough for our liking. Like, that's the craziness where we're living here today. I mean, I know you guys over in Britain have it pretty bad, locking up people left, right and centre for an off-colour joke or an off-colour remark.
30 people a day. We arrest 30 people a day in the UK for something they posted online. 30 a day. Russia do something like 300 a year. We do 30 a day.
And that's exactly what they want here. And that's not aimed, believe it or not, that's not aimed at these crazy guys making these crazy, abominable videos on TikTok. It's aimed at me and you. That's what it's really aimed at. Because, we are the fly in the ointment, making our videos, running our channels and bringing the truth to ordinary people who want to consume it. And we are the problem. And it's us they're after, Nick. It's us they're after, really.
Yeah, and I think even though it's harsh and it's hard times, I think it shows how weak they really are. There's a quote from Star Wars. You're as old as me, so you'll remember Star Wars, originally in 1977.
I was at it.
Yeah, me too, as a child. And there's a quote where Princess Leia is speaking to Darth Vader's boss, and she says to him, the tighter your grip, the more solar systems will slip through your fingers. And that's exactly what's happening now. That's why these hate crime laws are coming in. That's why the EU are forcing your government and other governments to do these things, because the EU is extremely worried. The EU can see the end of itself and can see nation states taking back control. So they're having to be more and more authoritarian to try to keep people under control. But the tighter they squeeze, the more people will slip through their fingers and start fighting back and become the rebellion.
Absolutely. And another thing that they're trying to do here, and I found it very amusing because I knew exactly what they were doing. They started suddenly all over the mainstream media was this discussion about should 16-year-olds be able to vote. Now, I know you have a bit of that over there too, but this was completely and utterly contrived. There's no public outcry for having giving them 16-year-olds votes here. None. It's not organic. There's no grassroots movement for that. This was all, and you could nearly see it. You know how this works, Nick, in the mainstream media, all the same headlines on the same day about the same topic that ordinary people have no interest in. So obviously, the word has come down from on high to push this, create some kind of a conversation where there is no conversation. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking, this is totally unorganic. Why would the government suddenly want to push this? And I'll tell you why. Because, yeah, they're seeing this sea of tricolours and they're thinking, these are people who are rediscovering their national spirit, who are rediscovering something we're trying desperately to knock out of them, to dilute. And we don't need this. So why not give younger people who are, as you know, completely indoctrinated? Because you know school now is basically indoctrination by the woke modern system. And so 16-year-olds are either still in secondary school or just got out of it. So they're totally fresh from the indoctrination camp. Why not give them the vote? Who do you think they'll vote for? Who will they vote for? So this is a cynical move, in my view, from the government to try and get more of their type of vote. Because, you know, when you get out of school, you start to make your own way and develop your own views. And eventually you become, you gain a lot of life experience and you work out all the bullshit. You work out all the bullshit you were taught and you move beyond that. But when you're 16, Nick, you're just a product of the whatever you've been taught, whatever has been rammed and crammed into your brain by the school system. Perfect fodder for the government parties. Because who are they going to vote for? Well, they're going to vote for the Green Party and all kinds of spurious lefty woke nonsense. They're not going to be nationalists because they'll have spent their entire time in school having any national spirit knocked out of them. Now, they may rediscover it, hopefully, as they get a bit more mature. So I was thinking, there's yet another instance of government manipulation, malicious manipulation, disguised as something else. We just want to empower people. We just want to empower people. No, you don't. You're looking for fodder, votes.
Yeah, it's always about votes. How old do you have to be in Ireland to get a tattoo, to smoke, and to drink alcohol?
It's all 18, Nick. It's all 18.
So for decades now, we've been telling young people you're not mature enough to make those three decisions. But when it comes to running the country and electing politicians, we're going to lower the age to 16. Not only is it hypocritical, but we see right through it. It's all about trying to manipulate younger people to vote left because the elite, as you said, the political elite, are scared stiff. They can see it all crumbling away. And this is just another last attempt to try to do something about it. Recently, I've been seeing a lot online about, what's he called? Conor McGregor, saying he's going to stand for president. Is he popular in Ireland? Is he someone that could be the vanguard for change? Or is he a publicity-seeking actor now? For someone who's Irish in Ireland, how do the people see Conor McGregor? Is he authentic or is he just jumping on a bandwagon?
Well, Conor McGregor is something of a force of nature. And there's no denying the man has achieved amazing things in his sphere. You just can't get past that. And even now, on other levels, he's doing amazing things. Business-wise, he's running various business, employing a lot of people. So the problem for Conor McGregor is twofold. One, the mainstream media hate him. The government hate him, obviously. And the mainstream media are hand in glove with the government.
And that makes me like him. And I don't even know the man, but if they hate him that much, it makes me go, he's probably a good guy.
Well, absolutely. And look, I'm no Conor McGregor fanboy. I know of him and I know what he's done, and I would have a passive interest in his career and what he does. But he in any normal times, Conor McGregor, they'd have a statue to him in O'Connell Street. in any normal times, because that's what we do with our sporting heroes whenever we get one. But no, Conor McGregor has been absolutely demonized over the past few years, and especially when he started tweeting out as he did, very vociferously about the immigration problem, about what's going on in Ireland with the political class and the EU overreach. Now, Conor McGregor's a working class lad from a working class area of Dublin, Crumlin, and he comes from humble origins, and he was a plumber's mate. He was an apprentice plumber, is what he was, and he's built himself up to what he is now, a world icon, a brand, a huge brand. But he's come out, he's a dyed-in-the-wool, die-hard Irishman. And I think there's no getting away from that. I'm not saying the man doesn't love the limelight and doesn't like to be out front and centre. Of course, everybody likes a bit of that, and he's well used to that. But his problem is, number one, that they hate him because he says all the wrong things, and he's shining a light, as you saw in the White House on St. Patrick's Day. That was a disaster for the government. Conor McGregor was in the Oval Office with the President of the United States, and Simon Harris, our deputy Taoiseach, was out in the street freezing his knackers off, talking to some 2-bit radio show host. So the optics were terrible for the government. And he said what he said, shining a light on Ireland's problems to the world. Now, okay, you could argue, he's not as erudite as some people, but he speaks in his own way, and he speaks very well to Irish people. But the other problem he has, Nick, is it's not that he is popular in Ireland. Yes, no matter how much they demonise him, yes, he is popular, especially with your ordinary vote. I'm not talking about the leafy suburbs of Dublin. It's probably very similar to the UK. I'm not talking the leafy suburbs who vote Green, those people. I'm talking about the ordinary working class people. Yes, he's a hero. And in world terms, he's massive, as you know, especially in the United States. But you can't just run for president, Nick. It's a bit of a closed shop. You can't just pay your 50 quid or 100 quid and off you go, run a campaign, because Conor McGregor isn't short of money. He could run a very good campaign with the top people. But you can't do that here, because in order to even run for president of Ireland, you have to have at least the support of 4 county councils behind you, or 20 members of the Oireachtas, which is the political, the Dáil and Senate. Now, our parliament is very, very much a closed shop. The main parties run it. And the county councils, like in Britain, they're all controlled by the political parties. So really, it's a gentleman's club. And if they don't want you in it, you can't get in. You can't just get into it. They can lock you out, and that's what they're doing. They're locking him out of the process, or trying to, unless something breaks. And I'll tell you, as a side note, we were very close to having what you have in London, a directly elected Lord Mayor of Dublin. They were very advanced on that, and they shelved it. They canned it, the whole plan, because they were afraid Conor McGregor would run and would win. So the whole thing got scrapped, because at the moment it's decided by the county councillors. They decide who's the mayor, not the people, And again, that's all along party lines. So the people are locked out. And so they're really doing their best to make sure Conor McGregor, who would be an almighty pain in the ass for the government as president, even though the president really has no power, it's ceremonial for the most part, but he's still the president. It's a title. Americans don't know what he can and can't do. Somebody off in Vietnam wouldn't know what he can and can't do. He'd be the president of Ireland. You can't take the title away from the person. So for him to be going out saying all kinds of awkward things, and maybe meeting all kinds of people that the government mightn't like him meeting, would be unmercifully embarrassing for the regime.
Oh, yeah.
He couldn't have it, Nick, for 7 years. 7 years of this.
One thing I can guarantee about Conor McGregor, who I don't know, never met, it's obvious from his career that man is fearless. So there'd be no airs and graces. He wouldn't be like, oh, I can't say this, I can't. He's fearless. He'll say and do whatever he wants, whenever he wants to do it, if he thinks it's the right thing to do. And I think Ireland needs that.
Well, sometimes, there's such an iron dome around Irish politics now. It really is. You've got the three big parties, and they have the system locked down. It's completely controlled. It really is the absolute epitome of a managed democracy. Now, how can you break through such an iron dome that's controlled 100%, and you have the mainstream media in lockstep, and you have all the big NGOs, you have the big corporations, they're all in lockstep. So, but the ordinary people aren't. We're locked out of it. We're the only ones who can't really influence anything. All the people inside the dome do everything and decide everything. Now, how do you break it or even crack it, Nick? Well, maybe for a Herculean task like that, you need a Hercules. Somebody like Conor McGregor, as you say, fearless. The man has no fear. And he might be a bit uncouth at times. And he's a man of many parts, perhaps not all of them presidential. But he could be a man with a hammer. And sometimes you need a man with a hammer, or a woman, if she's strong enough, to start banging on that dome and banging hard. And maybe you mightn't break it, but you might just crack it.
So it sounds like Conor McGregor could be the man if he wants to take on the task of breaking the iron dome.
The system is stacked against him. And it's not even about money, because the man has no end of money. He's got lots and lots of money. He has probably more money than all the politicians put together. But he can't get in if he can't break through this problem with the county councils, which will be on orders from the main parties not to support him. So you'll have maybe a few independent councillors say, look, I'm all for it. But the main parties, who are most of the councillors, are going to be told, and they will be told, Nick, very strenuously, don't go there. Do not go there. And as far as the members of parliament, we have independent members of parliament, but we don't have enough. We don't have enough. We're just below the threshold. And that's even assuming all of the independents backed them, which is no guarantee they would, because what they do here in Ireland is, you see it from our last cobbled together coalition, they just buy them off. They give them stuff in their constituency. We'll build you a new school. You vote with us and we'll throw loads of freebies at your constituency, make you look great, and you get voted back in. So it's all horse trading. So the only way I was thinking that he might get past this, and again, it's a very, very long shot, is if the administration in the US, who really do like Conor, I mean, you saw this on Patrick's Day. Not only did he meet Donald Trump, he met everybody. They all wanted to meet him. The whole administration wanted to meet him. Very, very popular man there. Now, unless they exerted, shall we say, some pressure in some ways on our political establishment, maybe, but it's a...
And I'm sure Trump is probably looking at that, because you know that...
Sure he is.
Trump has sent 3 people to the UK from his administration to look into why we're locking up a married woman for a tweet who deleted the tweet several hours later and has got 3.5 years in jail and has been refused parole and been refused looking at her case again. He sent his administration to investigate us as if we're a third world banana republic, and that's embarrassed our government. So hopefully Trump may do stuff like that with Ireland, because he needs us to be free democratic countries, because we're part of the American empire. Let's be honest. He can't have us going vogue and turning into some sort of commie dictatorship.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, I mean, look, we forget that the people over in the States, I mean, these people are not slow, Nick. They have the best people, the best experts. They're looking at the demographics changing. They're looking at the rise of Islam. They're looking at the rise of all kinds of the lefties. And they're saying, look, this thing is going really wrong over there. We need to figure this out, and we need to see what we can do to stop this just slipping off the edge to the point where they're all over the place, as you say, a rogue element that used to be our staunchest ally. I mean, these things are discussed at length. And as you say, he has actually sent people, which I read about, to the UK to say, look, can somebody get to the bottom of this and talk to whoever you have to talk to and figure this out and come back and tell us what you find. And he does have this thing with Starmer, the Keir Starmer, and we all know who the boss there is. And it's not Keir Starmer. So I'm sorry to burst anybody's bubble about that one. And it's the same for our guys here. Micheál Martin was over in the White House doing the Shamrock thing, which is a kind of a tradition for St. Patrick's Day with the leader of the country. But he was there like a week before St. Patrick's Day, whenever Donald Trump could fit him in for an hour. Whereas Conor McGregor was there with his whole family on St. Patrick's Day, on the day, and had plenty of time to talk to Donald Trump in the Oval Office and go and give his speech on the plinth. I mean, Donald Trump had all the time in the world for Conor McGregor, and he barely could fit the leader of the country in, probably when he was between doing other things. I can slot you in for 10 minutes with that bowl of shamrock, but you'll have to be here at 10 past, otherwise you're not it's off. So, these are things that are happening now. Now, if they were to put a bit of pressure, maybe under the counter, kind of subtly, and say, listen, give that guy a chance, or else things will be frosty, Now, will that happen? I don't know. Would the authorities here go for it? Again, I don't know, because we are very much in the EU bubble. As you know, you were lucky enough to escape. We're still stuck, and very much stuck. So if the EU wouldn't want a Conor McGregor because he'd be a pain in the ass for them, our government don't want him because he'd be constantly calling them out. So imagine 7 years of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's a 7-year term, Nick. It's not 4 or 5.
Yeah. It's 7. Yeah.
So 7 years of Conor McGregor. There's a myriad of ways that could go wrong for the government.
Oh, yeah.
And imagine who he might be inviting to the Oris presidential big head. Imagine who he might invite. Well, the whole thing could be mad. Like he's a loose cannon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the Americans look at Europe now and say to themselves, when Europe messes up, we get dragged into a world war. It happened twice last century. If we don't fix Europe now, there's a potential we get dragged into World War III, and nobody wants war. And they're sick of bailing out Europe every time we mess up. So there's a vested interest in America there. So maybe they will, and they're putting on pressure on the UK all the time. And I'm sure they're doing it behind the scenes to Ireland as well. But I think we'll have to wait and see. I think Ireland needs a kick up the backside, just like the UK needs a kick up the backside. Hopefully, an Irish version of reform will start coming through. And I think it will if these demonstrations keep growing and growing, because that's the voter base. And when you see the voter base on the streets, it's like, I can get elected here. If I can give the people what they want, I get elected. And that's how politicians work. It's all about votes all the time, so they can keep in power and keep climbing that greasy pole and feathering their own nests. And hopefully that will come. But Derek, thank you so much for coming back on. Really enjoyed that.
Absolutely.
And let's do it again soon.
I certainly hope so. Can't wait. Looking forward to it already.
Thank you. Bye-bye.